If you find like a zero-day exploit, for example, right? There's a lot of people who'd be very interested to get their hands on it. And you can make a lot of money selling it to the wrong people. So the companies obviously don't want that, right? They would much rather that you come to them with that. But you know what? Why are you gonna? Unless you're a really good person, right? You're gonna be like, well, I could get a huge amount of money for it. So they put up these bug bounties essentially, where if you find like some kind of bug, it doesn't have to be necessarily like so extreme, like hacking into an iPhone, but even like small bugs with software. So a lot of companies do offer that, and sort of to encourage people to find bugs and then report them to the company and then get paid for it, right? So it can be quite lucrative actually. There's people who earn like a lot of money from doing
just from like hacking,
just trying to find like vulnerabilities, and
they're
they're making money from that. So that's like one of the things that a lot of companies do.
Hello and welcome to the Knowness podcast, the Vault of Knowledge.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Vault of Knowledge. Today we'll be talking to Firas Aleem, our computer science subject lead. Have you ever thought about hacking? Well, did you know you can make money from it through ethical hacking? We'll be learning a bit more about that and cybersecurity today, and a bit more about Firas and his passion for computer science. So thank you and join us for this week's episode. So, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, my name is Firas. I'm the computer science subject lead at Knowness. Outside of that, I'm currently doing my degree at the University of Cambridge. So I'm doing my master's in advanced computer science. And actually, it's really great being back in Birmingham because I completed my undergraduate degree from here last year. So I got my bachelor's of computer science from here.
Gotcha.
So it's been quite fun being back. We're at the Exchange. It's a beautiful building. It's part of the University of Birmingham.
Vault as well.
The Vault. I really love this place. It's really, really cool.
Very cool.
I also just want to mention before, as we're starting, I have a bit of a cough. So I'd like to apologize for that. I'm going to try to minimize it. And I've had all kinds of cough syrup and whatnot, but we'll see how it goes.
Is it from like here, the cough syrup, or?
No, actually, there's some from home. There's some from here. I've been mixing and matching.
Like a
cocktail,
just
mixture. I just really want the cough to stop, basically.
That's I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But hey, home sweet home. You're back in Birmingham.
Home. Yeah, back to Birmingham. We love Birmingham.
You did computer science in Birmingham, right?
I did do computer science in Birmingham.
How was that?
You know what? It was pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that my degree was slightly different to most people's because of COVID.
Oh, you had to.
Yeah. So I started in 2021, which was kind of at the tail end of COVID. But I think
everything was online still. Like
everything was still online. So for me, because I was an international student, I had the option of doing my first term from home. And there was a lot of restrictions on me leaving and all this kind of stuff. So I was like,
I remember
Saudi was quite strict on that. So I was like, it's probably easier to just do it online. But I think part of that, you end up missing out on the freshers experience and like meeting people and all that kind of stuff. So when I actually did come in the second term, it was like January of like 2022. Gotcha. There were some events and stuff going on, but it was a bit strange. It wasn't the same. And stuff was still online. So I feel like even if I had come, I don't know how much stuff there would have been anyway. Because it was just kind of really strange. So like
it's
the first
gray zone, I remember.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just one of those things where it was a bit strange. And then I remember our exams were online. And I flew home for Easter and I was gonna come back just to do the exams. And one of my friends was like, "Why are you going back if the exams are online?" I'm like, you know what? That's a really good point. Actually, why am I going back? I don't actually know. So I was like, I might as well just stay and do the exams from home. So I ended up staying back home. And then I literally came just to pack my stuff up and put it into storage. So first year was quite strange, I'd say. But then second year, I feel like is where I really had that like freshers experience and everything. So going out.
There's the signature cough.
There we go. The signature cough. You guys are gonna get to hear a lot of that today. I'm gonna try to minimize it, but we'll see how it goes. So second year I feel like was where I got a bit of that freshers experience, like meeting people, all this kind of stuff.
Actually doing stuff, society stuff.
Exactly.
Saudi society as well.
There's a Saudi society as well. Yeah. So I went to some of their events and whatnot. And there was just like a mix of doing a lot of this stuff, lots of events going on. It was kind of back to normal at that point as well. So we didn't really have like online classes and stuff. It was.
I think it was starting to become a bit more normal again.
It was starting to become a lot more normal. And then we had some group projects, so you meet people through that. Group projects are always great.
It's better than like online.
Yeah, exactly. Just like just doing it on Zoom. So it was interesting. But one of the things that ended up happening was that so one of the lectures in first year, one of the modules, it was a math and logic module, and it was one of those modules where like when I started doing it, I was like, I'm absolutely gonna fail this. We get to fail one module each year. This is gonna be the one. I have no idea what's going on. Like I don't even know. But the thing is, it was all on Zoom. And I guess a lot of the other students in the class who are also on Zoom were quite shy. So I ended up being like the only one who was really like answering questions, or like one of the few people. So I got to know the lecturer quite a bit, and I ended up doing quite well on the exam because it actually made sense. Because the lecturer was quite good.
He was good at explaining things.
He was really good at explaining things. Exactly. Yeah. It's like I like lecturers like that. And then over the summer, he messaged me and he's like, "Oh, would you like to be a TA for the module? Because you did quite well and like you have quite an understanding." And I was like, "Okay, interesting." And he was like, "It's a new thing we're trying in the CS department, right? So we're not sure how it's gonna go." And I was like, sounds interesting, right? Like, why not, right? He was saying it's going to be like low time commitment, as much time as you can put in, like 2-3 hours a week, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, cool. And he's like, I'll guide you through it. You don't need to worry. I think it was me and like 2 others.
Would this be during a year out or like?
No, so this was during my second year, essentially, right? So it would be like, I'm taking my normal modules and everything.
And then like 2-3 hours on top of that.
Yeah, 2-3 hours on top of that. I was like, you know what? It's not much. We'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll enjoy it. I can always just be like, oh, actually, I don't have time for it. We'll see how it goes. So I started doing that, and I ended up really, really enjoying it. So I think one of the main things was that I was able to explain things the way I wish someone had explained them to me.
Gotcha.
And I think that really helped. And I think the students really resonated with that. And it was kind of crazy actually, because I was running basically sort of like office hour help session type things. So I'd have like a small room, maybe space for like 2-3 people. People would come and like ask me questions on the content, right?
And you kind of help them out.
Kind of help them out, exactly, right? And then it's like, that's how it started, right? So there's like 2-3 people coming along, right? Then like a few more people started coming and they all had similar questions. So I was like, oh, like let me explain it on the board, right? So there's like, 5-6 people in the room. And then more people started coming and it became like 10 people and like people are like, just standing, like sitting on the ground because there's no space.
Gotcha.
So I'm like talking to the lecturer, I'm like, I think we need a bigger room. And he's like, yeah, I think we need a bigger room.
So
you get a slightly bigger room, there's like 20 people and it just kept growing from there. And by the end of it, I think I had like 60 or 70 people. And I was basically like in a lecture hall, just like explaining questions and this kind of thing. So it kind of escalated.
From like a student to like.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was, at the same time, I was still a student, right? I was still just doing my degree. Which some of the students were really surprised about because they're like, wait, what?
You're still like in uni.
You're still in uni, right? Like what's going on, right? But it was really, really like a rewarding experience, right? Because for most of it, I was running it solo, basically. So I was running it solo for most of it. So it was like, and I kind of had to like figure out the lesson plan and like, what am I going to do, right? Because in the beginning, it was sort of like, I'm just there. People can come ask me questions. But then it sort of became an expectation of like, okay, people are showing up to the session because they want help with the subject. So I guess I'll make questions and like go through them and this kind of thing. And that sort of continued into third year. So I think that was really one of the highlights of my undergrad experience. I really, really enjoyed that. And it was all because like, I did the term online. So in the end, it ended up being a good thing, even though maybe I missed out on some stuff. So that was, it all worked out in the end. But, yeah.
Oh, that's cool, man. Yeah. So we say it was a good experience like throughout.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I had like obviously the university experience as well, but this whole thing like really added to it. And then obviously because I knew the lecturer quite well, I knew the whole module team that was there.
Everything kind of flowed together.
Everything flowed together. Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting you say that. It's going from like the position of like a student to a teacher, and with you it's like you're teaching from like your own perspective in a sense.
Yeah.
You know what works in terms of teaching because that's what worked for you, and then you kind of re-employ that. Back to the students. I think
with lecturers and stuff, they're obviously experts, right? They know this content completely.
Yeah.
But they're far away from being that first-time learner, right? Yeah. That's the thing. So if you're thinking about
quite a while away from them.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you're thinking about these first years, they've just come from A level. A lot of the subject that we were doing as well, it was related to like logic, and they hadn't come across any of that. So it was completely new to them. And they're like having to get to grips with it.
Yeah.
And I think that was quite difficult. And it's like, when you know it so well, you're like, what do you mean? It's just easy. It's just like this, right?
Yeah.
But for me, like I remember, because at the beginning I was like, oh, I'm going to fail this module. I remember like being in the situation they were in. And I was like, no, guys, it gets better. Trust me. Like I was able to do it. I'm sure you guys will be able to as well, right? And I'll help you out. And like, it was really rewarding because I had a lot of people come up to me after and be like, I passed the exam because of you. Like, I got really good feedback from it. And I was like, it was a really rewarding experience, I think. And like it, like I was saying, I got to know the module team and the module lead really well. So when I was applying to Cambridge for my master's, I had really good references as well, which really helped. Because I think one of the things was that our cohort was quite large. So we had like...
for computer science, it was massive.
Yeah, computer science, I think it was like one of the biggest ones behind medicine. So we had like 400 and something people. It was really like, a lot of people,
For one degree. It's loads.
Yeah, it's a lot of people. And I remember like when we were at graduation, I was like seeing people who were graduating from the same degree as me that I'd never seen before. I was like, no idea who these people are. Like, what's going on? Like, okay, cool. I guess we're on the same degree. And I think part of it was also because some people do year in industry, year abroad, that kind of thing. The people I started first and second year with were not necessarily who I graduated with. It's like I just went straight into my third year, but somebody might be coming back from a year, placement year, or a year abroad, something like that, right? So it kind of was like a mix of people. But overall, it was quite good. But yeah, it was a very, very large cohort. And my point there was kind of, it's difficult to get to know the lecturers when it's such a large cohort. Like it's harder to stand out. Like even if you're going to
like personal like touch and
exactly, right? Because I mean, in the lectures, you're one face in like hundreds.
Yeah.
And then even if you're going to office hours, there's probably going to be a lot of other people, and like you don't really get to know the lecturer well.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is one of the things that the degree did suffer with, because I talked to people who were doing like smaller degrees where there's maybe only 60, 70 people, right? And like
it's a
the lecture,
lot easier.
it's a lot easier because lecturers actually know the people better, and
they can like kind of tell how they teach towards the students.
Exactly, yeah. Especially when it's like much smaller. If we're talking like 10, 15 people, you can really do that.
Exactly. Yeah,
but then with 400 people, like, I mean, it was also interesting being on the teaching side of it. And like, you know, as a student, you're like, oh, why would they do that? Like, that seems so stupid. Like, why would they even make this decision or whatever? But it's surprising like how much thought goes into it, because they have to consider the needs of like 400 people or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And they design the lessons and adapt it for that, basically. So it's like, you know, you get an appreciation for like, okay, maybe they actually do know what they're doing.
No, but you sound like a very, very good teacher as well as a student. So very lucky to have you as our computer science.
Yeah, I'm the computer science subject lead. Yeah, we actually just spent yesterday recording a lot of the videos.
The course videos are coming out soon. I think by the time this releases, they'll be.
I think so they should be out. That should be quite good. But yeah, that
was
was
very interesting. Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. Yeah, it was quite fun.
And what made you go from, you know, like graduating and going into your master's instead of like to work, or
I think
what made you do it?
Yeah.
Why did you pick that master's as well?
Why that master's as well? That's a good question. I think I wanted to specialize a bit more. I think that was one of the reasons. And yeah, I think that was basically like the main reason. My plan had always been to sort of do a master's.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure if I wanted to do an integrated master's, because I thought it might be good to like go to a different university, get a different environment, that kind of thing. Because I know people do integrated masters, and it's a bit easier, I guess, because you're kind of just continuing. By the end, you end up with a master's. But I kind of wanted to do something a bit different, get a change of scenery, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And the other thing was I wanted to specialize a bit more. So I'm interested in cybersecurity. So I was like, okay, like I want to do a master's where I can maybe focus a bit more. And then this specific master's, so it's the MPhil in Advanced Computer Science at Cambridge. The reason they pitched it, or like the way they pitch it, is that it's kind of an introduction to research, right? So
like computer science research.
Computer science research, exactly. So it's kind of like a PhD taster in a way. Because obviously when you're doing a PhD, you have to kind of dedicate 3 or 4 years of your life to this thing. And when you're going into it, you're not entirely sure, like, is this what I want to do? Like, you don't want to end up, you know, doing 2 years of it and then come out being like, oh,
I don't actually decide.
I didn't actually want to do a PhD, right? So the way they kind of pitched it, which I think was really interesting, and it's one of the reasons that drew me to it, was that you can kind of get to see what research is like, right? Sort of similar to PhD level, but it's only like a year-long, 9-month course, right? So you're not giving that huge commitment of like 3 or 4 years. You're sort of getting to just see how it is for a bit. If it works, you know, great. You can apply to a PhD. You can, you know, there's pathways from going to a master's to a PhD, and you can do that. Or if you find, you know, actually research is not for me, I kind of want to go into a different field. Well, you've ended up with a master's and you've only spent like 9 months to a year.
And you got all the experience.
You got all the experience and everything, exactly. So you haven't made this huge commitment. So that was one of the things that drew me to it, because I was not sure if I wanted to do a PhD or not. So I think that's one of the things that it's one of the reasons I chose this. The program.
And it kind of opens the pathways as well for you as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially like career-wise. Do you have any like ideas at the moment where you want to go with your career? Or, again, it's a very early time.
Yeah, it is very early time. Yeah, no, but it's something to think
having
about.
Ideas in your head.
Yeah, no, I think like I said, I'm interested in cybersecurity, so I probably want to work in industry, hopefully cybersecurity related. But I'm not opposed to like something like software engineering as well. But yeah, I think one thing that I was thinking about is that something like a PhD you can always come back to, like later on in life.
Definitely.
So I was thinking, you know, like let me spend a few years in industry, see how that is. You can always come back and do a PhD and just sort of, you know, I don't have a very firm plan in mind. I'm just gonna see how it goes. But generally, just like applying for jobs, probably gonna work in industry for a bit. That's generally the plan.
See where it goes from there.
Just see where it goes.
I mean, as soon as you mentioned cybersecurity, there are a lot of I'm not sure if I'm wrong, but like courses specifically for cybersecurity.
Yeah, there are quite a lot. I would say
science.
Even computer science in general. I mean, cybersecurity would just be a bit more focused, I think, right? Just around that kind of thing. Whereas some of the broader boot camps or those kinds of things, they might just be more broad CS, because CS is really quite a broad field.
Very, very broad. I was gonna say,
like there's so many different
elements and aspects to it.
Exactly. Yeah. Like there's something for everyone, really. And the other thing is that, you know, it's kind of in like every aspect that we look at, right? If you look like medicine or like, you know, chemistry, physics, like there's some kind of CS. It was actually surprising because, like, you know, when I was starting my term at Cambridge, you're meeting all these different people, they're doing all these different degrees. When I tell them I'm doing computer science, they're like, oh, like I do a bit of programming in my degree, like even history and geography and stuff you wouldn't really expect. But it's
I've
like,
noticed that as well. A lot of friends
like,
doing random courses and they themselves have had to learn programming.
They've had to learn programming or some aspect of CS. So it's like really interesting seeing how it's basically like everywhere, right?
Even with me, because I have my background again with medicine, is I want to go into medical technology.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's very like
so
in like CS.
CS and medicine. Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of everywhere. Right?
It's like in every aspect.
There's like a lot that you can get into, right? Like there's obviously all the hype right now is around AI and like, you know, machine learning, all that stuff, generative AI, large language models, all that stuff. And that there's like a lot of research going on in that.
Yeah, with machine learning and stuff like that. Exactly, like one of the previous startups we had on the episode as well, they use like machine learning for this magic mirror.
Yeah.
Kind of detects their own personal preferences when it comes to like the outfits.
Okay, yeah.
Helps,
help them choose like what clothes they want to wear, basically.
Exactly. Or give them
that's quite cool.
Ideas. Yeah, no, it's a really cool idea.
I should look into that actually.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Have
a look at that.
But that uses like that machine learning kind of model.
Yeah.
Which again is super interesting, and that is very, very like used in like all sorts of like research and stuff like that. But yeah, it's very like broad and expansive CS.
Yeah.
For me, from like an outsider's perspective, it can seem a bit like overwhelming. Would you say like doing a degree in computer science can help you figure out, which side to get into, what might interest you? Or
I think so. I think definitely, yeah. Because when I started my degree, I wasn't sure what area I wanted to pursue.
Yeah.
So one of the things is when I was choosing my degree, actually, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do math or computer science. Because I always enjoyed math. It was like my favorite subject at school, and I was pretty good at it.
Yeah.
So, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to go purely like into pure math and stuff, right? Because that's I don't know what like there's applications for it obviously, but I feel like CS was more broad because I was always interested in computers and stuff as well. So with CS, I mean, honestly, like I think a degree is useful because we covered like a lot of different stuff, and you kind of get a really good idea of the field, and like you can sort of choose what you want to specialize in, right? So with our 3-year degree, at the end of it, you do your dissertation, which is quite a bulk of your degree, right? I think it's 25% of your degree or something. So quite a lot. But there, you really get to choose who you want to do the degree with and what area you want to do it in, right? So some of my friends, they were doing it in AI, they were doing it in ML. I did it. Mine was in cybersecurity. So it was specifically looking at this. Let's not get too nerdy, but I was looking at this web authentication protocol. So there's these things called passkeys, which are sort of replacing passwords now. And the way it works is that you don't have to remember anything. It's just saved on your device, right?
I think Apple uses this.
Apple uses them. There's quite a few companies starting to use them. It's quite like it's an emerging technology. So there's not really too many, but they're starting to use it. And the point is that they're much more secure than passwords. And I was sort of looking at that and like making an extension with this thing called zero knowledge proofs. It gets kind of complicated, but it was like looking at that basically. So I was looking at the protocol and like, how can you maybe add something of your own into it and kind of improve the protocol or have it do different things basically, right? And that was really interesting. And my supervisor sort of focuses in that area or was focusing in that area as well. So he was able to help me out and everything. So you can really kind of dive down into what interests you at the end of your degree. But at the same time, in your final year, you get to pick your modules. So first and second year, your modules are fixed, but then in final year, you get to pick your modules. So, I went for a cybersecurity module. Our University of Birmingham offers this teaching in computer science in schools module. So essentially what it is that the first term you're kind of training and like getting ready, and the second term you're actually doing a placement in school. So
teaching it to
so you're going to work with like computer science teachers, and you're sort of just like working with any grades basically, or any years, I guess it's called here. So I know some people worked from like year 1s to like year 7s. The school I went to, I was working with year 7s up until year 13s.
Gotcha.
It's like sixth form is all a mix, and you're just sort of helping them out with CS, telling them a bit about your background, like what got you into CS, like that kind of thing. I think it was really interesting with the year 13s because they were sort of doing similar stuff in computer science to what we had done at university. So I was able to pull out my notes and show them, and I think that was like a bit inspiring for them because they're like, oh yeah, like it's the same stuff. Like oh my god, like this, it's not, we're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. Like it actually gets used.
Some application to it,
Exactly. Exactly. So that was one of the modules, but you have a lot of flexibility, I think. And I think in general, the degree does help you get an idea of the field. Like if you're just coming into it like, oh, I like computer science, I don't really know what I want to do. I think it definitely helps with that to, help you pick what you want to choose, like what you want to do later on. Like for me, I was like, maybe like cybersecurity because it's kind of math related.
Kind of what you're into,
kind of what I'm into, but I'm not sure. Like we'll see, maybe something else interests me. But it just ended up being that,
you don't think about like teaching or stuff like that. And the reason that kind of comes to mind is I remember talking to someone and they were telling me about how a big problem now with computer science teachers is that so many people graduate with a computer science degree, but then they go on to more higher paying jobs and research and that kind of stuff, as opposed to becoming a computer science teacher, which isn't as it's not going to be as well paid. So they a lot of schools have had to like outsource a computer science teacher to a maths teachers had to learn how to do computer science, or someone who's done like a little computer science course thing and that's it.
I think we found that a lot. I was talking to other people on the placements that they went to in the schools, and it's not necessary that the people had like a CS background. A lot of them didn't really have that, right?
Exactly,
and I think one of the reasons they actually have this module is sort of to encourage people to go
more into teaching.
Exactly, because there is quite a shortage, and it's something that I thought about. And like, I mean, maybe later on in life I might come back to it, but right now I was like, I don't know if I want to go into teaching at the moment, but it's definitely something I really, really enjoyed. And I would say I think I enjoyed university teaching a bit more.
Yeah.
But then obviously for that you need to have a PhD, and it's a bit more academic.
It's a bit more of a longer,
bit more of a longer thing.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be opposed at some point to like going to teach computer science in schools, because I think it can be quite inspiring for them as well. If you've done like CS a lot and like you have like a whole background there, you can kind of be like, oh, this was my journey, and like encourage some people to go into CS maybe. But yeah, I think I'm not opposed to that. Maybe sometime later on. Yeah.
And again, you mentioned like being in school and how inspiring it is. I feel like with CS, there's so much you can do with it.
Yeah.
And I remember when we went to BET like a few days ago, we saw a lot of really cool applications of this. So for example, you can see how with these little Arduino kits and stuff, you can do little things, or even with like a small Raspberry Pi. And there was this there was this funny video I saw a long time ago of a guy who had like a little Elmo, but with a camera built in,
right,
and had like using machine learning, a racial detection system.
Okay,
so
interesting. It was quite interesting. I mean, there's a lot you can do with stuff like that.
Yeah, like, exactly. That was just like a funny thing.
That
one. But there's so much like applications with it. And for like a student to see that, I think they need to. I don't think students realize just how much there is you can do with a CS degree.
Yeah.
And how much you can program, and all the little projects you can do, and different careers you can get into.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think that definitely we need more stuff like that. Going to schools, inspiring more students.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the thing you're talking about with Arduinos and Raspberry Pis, there's so many like cool little things that you can do, right? And it's like it's very accessible as well. That's the thing, right? Like you don't need like a massive background, because the
guy that did that video, he had no computer.
Exactly.
background.
Yeah. So like the
learned
interfaces
online. That's
exactly the interfaces and everything are quite simple, and they're like easy to learn. So you can have kids in school sort of using that and sort of maybe getting inspired from that, and they want to do something more complicated and that kind of thing. So I think that stuff is really important.
Yeah,
I think some of the regular like the courses, at like GCSE and A level, they don't incorporate as much of that. It's sort of very like, okay, you just got to memorize the stuff or like just learn it, and it doesn't have that hands-on experience, which I feel like once you come to university, you get a bit of that, and you're like, oh, okay, like this is actually really cool, and like like robotics and stuff like that. Like a lot of people find that interesting as well, right? But it's not covered as much, I think, at like A level and GCSE. Which I guess is one of the things we're trying to do at Knowness, is the university taster courses coming soon.
Made about Knowness.
Knowness.com. But I think it would be good to sort of have an idea of like, what is it like at university, and sort of get an idea before you commit to it, right?
And seeing like the different routes it can take you. And we also have a computer science taster course available at Knowness.
Knowness.com. Yeah,
give you like a good taste of what it's like at university. Because not a lot of people. I feel like a lot of people go into computer science with a certain image of what it's like. But in reality, it's very different.
Exactly.
Or some people, don't realize just how flexible it is in terms of modules and stuff like that. So with this course, it's kind of designed to kind of give you that idea and stuff like that. But I guess, question to you now, if you could go back in time, would you have still done computer science or?
I think so. I think so. Yeah. I think I was quite passionate about it, and it's something that
opens those doors.
Yeah. As a whole, like obviously you have your moments where like, why did I choose this? But as a whole, like I really enjoyed it. I think it, it's something that really interests me. I find it super interesting, especially the specialization I've chosen. Like I find it really, really like fun, and like I think that's the main thing, right? So I don't think I would change it going back. I think I'll probably stick with computer science.
And what about people out there that think there's always that question about, is it really necessary to have a degree to become a programmer? What's your kind of thoughts on that kind of thing?
Well, I'm biased because I'm getting 2 degrees now.
So, you're on the bias side.
Putting that to the side, I think if you want to go into programming, you don't have to get a degree. Because there's so many boot camps and stuff, and like even now with like ChatGPT and AI and all this stuff,
exactly.
You can basically you can just teach yourself, right? And it's like it's honestly incredible. Like you can just go and like. It's just having like your own personal teacher, right?
Exactly,
you just go back and forth being like, oh, I don't understand how this works. Can you explain this again? Can you do it?
Especially with online, how everything's just
exactly. Everything's accessible, and like you've got so many resources in addition to all the boot camps and stuff that like if you just want to do programming and that's something you want to get into, I think honestly you don't really need a degree to do that, right?
It's different to like other courses of medicine where nursing, we have to be in person.
Exactly. No, exactly.
And get that hands-on experience.
I don't want a ChatGPT trained doctor.
Exactly.
When I go to the hospital, I want it to be like a real proper thing. But
the hands-on experience with computer science is online.
Exactly. A lot of it. I mean, you're working with a computer, so you can do it on your own computer, right? So it's not really a thing. I think one of the things that a degree gets you is that it's sort of showing employers or whoever else that like, hey, like this person got through it, sort of for the piece of paper at the end, if you want to dumb it down to that. But I think it does teach you a lot of other things like problem solving, and like you get like a broad understanding of computer science. So, like the modules we did, we looked at like, okay, how does the computer actually work? How does like memory in the computer work? Like, you're writing this programming language. what actually happens for it to run the code. Like what are the different
Background.
steps, like all this different stuff related to like how the computer works, which you can learn on your own as well. I'm not saying that's impossible, right? But I think it's being in the university environment, you have those like modules and that kind of thing. It's like this sort of thing that they've built for you that you can kind of do.
And I guess that it's the whole accountability side of things as well.
Exactly. That's the other side of it, right?
By yourself, there's so many stories, even with myself.
Yeah.
You'll start to learn programming online, and then after a month or two, you just give up.
Yeah, I mean, I've started so many courses, and it's like, yeah, I'll get to that eventually.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you never
just-
do, right?
just-
So
yeah.
the accountability part does help. Obviously, you do things like group projects, which in the moment you kind of hate, but generally it is quite good, like working with other people, and like you kind of get like that experience of working with different people and everything.
Definitely, yeah.
And it's sort of it's supposed to reflect how it is like programming in a team, for example, or stuff like that. So I think it is still worth it, right? But I think if you just want to get into programming, maybe like you've done a degree in something else, you kind of want to switch over. I think honestly, the boot camps and just looking at resources online is good enough. Like it's quite good. Like, and it's only getting better with all the AI tools and everything, right?
Exactly,
So,
and all the different courses. that
exactly,
pop
yeah.
up.
So it's one of those things where I don't think you need the degree, but I think if you are really passionate about computer science and you want to learn this whole like broad thing, I think it kind of still is worth doing a degree.
Yeah, definitely. But with computer science again, there's so many different routes and as we saw, we've only touched on a few of them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But with you, why did you pick cybersecurity? Because I find that really interesting.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
why is that what you ultimately decided to kind of go towards?
I think part of it was I was mentioning that I enjoyed math.
Yeah.
So a lot of like the part of cybersecurity that I'm quite interested in is cryptography, and that's quite math heavy, right?
Yeah.
So that's like looking at like different equations and stuff. How are we keeping things secure? That kind of
Gotcha,
thing, right?
yeah.
So it is quite math heavy. So it kind of goes back to that like really like that interest that I had in math. And it's just I think it's just what I found interesting, to be honest with you. It's just like I personally like when we were doing AI modules and ML, like it just felt like a lot of statistics. I was never a fan of that at school, right? I know it's not just statistics. There's a lot of other stuff.
Yeah,
there,
exactly.
I know some people would be like, "Oh, it's not just stats." Okay. But I think it's just what I found interesting, right? Like I tried out other stuff. I looked at like theory kind of stuff. So like very theoretical computer science, which is basically just like math in disguise. Looking at like programming type stuff, like programming language theory, that kind of thing. AI, ML. Like I got a broad like experience across a lot of different fields, but it was just cybersecurity that I was just the most interested in. I think it's just one of those things that like you just find the thing that you're like passionate about and you just enjoy it and you're not really able to explain it.
Yeah.
And I think that's how it was for me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and it kind of just, I guess, tickles your pickle.
Yeah, exactly.
Please
If you
edit that out.
if you want to
Please
use
edit
that
that
language,
out.
I guess.
Please edit
Yeah.
that out. Please.
Yeah, sure.
It's just it's a knowness
Yeah.
pickle. No, you need to get like a knowness like merch.
He's just digging
Notice-
himself deeper and deeper into the
it's
hole.
not
Wow,
good.
incredible stuff,
Please-
man.
please edit this out.
Absolutely fantastic.
What I was gonna say was, so with cybersecurity, what does a career in that actually look like?
So there's quite
Because
a lot.
in my head, like sorry to interrupt you, but it's kind of like you're on your laptop and you're just kind of sitting there all night waiting for something to happen.
I mean, you could say that for all of computer science. To
Yeah,
be
to
honest
be
with
fair,
you.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, there's quite a few aspects. So you've got like, one of the things I find interesting is like penetration testing. So yeah, penetration testing is basically when you hire like a team of people, right? So there's different teams. So there's red team and blue team,
Yeah.
right? So if you're red team, you're attacking a company. If you're blue team, you're sort of defending,
Gotcha.
right? And they're like people you're hiring to break into your system, right?
What about like hiring like hackers? And
Yeah, it's
stuff?
basically hiring
Ethical
hackers to
hacking.
like get into your system,
Yeah.
so that because they're not doing it maliciously, right? Like you're actually hiring them to do it.
They're just looking for vulnerabilities.
They're looking
and
for
stuff like that.
vulnerabilities, right? So at the end, they'll give you a report of like, hey, this is how we were able to get in.
Yep.
These are our recommendations. This is what you should change, right? Like, and it'll be listed from like, this is high priority, lower priority, that kind of thing, right? So that's like one aspect of it. And like, it's actually surprising if you listen to the stories of people who are in that field that a lot of it doesn't even come down to the technical side. It's purely social engineering.
Yeah.
So-
Like I've heard a lot of hacking is literally just
It's just social engineering. Yeah, exactly. It's like, can you just talk your way into it? Like,
Yeah.
you tell the security guard, like, oh, I lost my key card. Like, I really need to get in. Like,
Yeah,
I've left my
yeah,
laptop.
yeah.
My boss is gonna be so mad at me. If you just go with that, and they're like, oh yeah, like I'll let you
Yeah,
in, whatever.
they'll sign
right?
you,
I'll
they'll
tap you
scan
in.
you
It's all
in
good,
and
right?
that's
And
it,
then
yeah.
you're just a
Same
random
thing.
person walked in off the street, and
Exactly.
like, yeah,
You're
so-
broken into a house. and
Exactly.
it's
Yeah. So
apartment.
much of it is that like social engineering aspect of it. That's one side. Obviously, then you have people working in companies who are, building the security around the different tools and stuff that the company's using. I mean, that's just like some of the stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
so there's like really a broad range of stuff you could.
And I heard there's
bring.
this thing as well. Like I think Sony did this as well. Like they pay like bounties.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they'll
So
offer you like thousands or
Exactly,
even
yeah,
millions
yeah.
if you identify vulnerability or exploit.
yeah, so a lot of big companies have it, where essentially they're like bug bounties.
Yeah.
So what it is that if you find like a vulnerability in like say like in the iPhone, for example, right, where
Yeah.
you can like hack into someone's iPhone, right?
Yeah.
That's worth a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
If you go onto like, there's a lot of governments, there's a lot of like bad people out there who would pay a huge amount of money to get their hands on that, right?
Yeah.
They're called like 0-day exploits. So 0-day exploits, the reason they're called 0 days is because it's been 0 days since they've been discovered. They haven't been discovered, right? So if you find like a 0-day exploit, for example, right? There's a lot of people who'd be very interested to get their hands on it. And you can make a lot of money selling it to the wrong people. So the companies obviously don't want that, right? They would much rather that you come to them with that. But you know why are you gonna, unless you're a really good person, right? You're gonna be like, well, I could get a huge amount of money for it. So they put up these bug bounties essentially, where if you find like some kind of bug, it doesn't have to be necessarily like so extreme, like, you know, hacking into an iPhone, but even like small bugs with software, they'd rather you come to them and they'll pay you a bit of money, right? And for them, they've fixed the vulnerability there, right? And it's useful for them because they like, you know, obviously they're working on their security, but they can have like, you can test it as much as you want, right? Inside the company. But when you have like multiple millions of users using it, they're going to run into edge cases and stuff, right? They're going to run into bugs, vulnerabilities, that kind of thing. So a lot of companies do offer that, and sort of to encourage people to find bugs and then report them to the company and then get paid for it, right? So it can be quite lucrative, actually. There's people who earn like a lot of money from doing
just
that.
from like hacking,
just
trying
from,
just trying to find
full-time like vulnerabilities, and they're making money from that. So that's like one of the things that a lot of companies do. And it's like surprising when companies don't do that, because you're like, okay, do you want me to just go to the people who want? Like, I'll go to the bad people and sell. Like, okay, you don't want it. Like, okay, that's cool, man. That's cool. Yeah. So I think a lot of the big companies do actually do it, and they have quite a bit behind it to try and get people to come to the company instead.
Yeah, and a lot of like the major like hacking like episodes in the past that we've heard of, like the massive iCloud like hack or leak from ages ago. The Sony hack of like I think 2012 maybe, I don't remember when it was. Were those, I don't know if you know about those, were those predominantly based on like social engineering, or
those were I think quite technical? I'm not super brushed on that up on them.
Yeah,
it's been a while since I've like, you know, like read articles or listened to podcasts about it, but I think a lot of those were quite technical, right? And the thing is that like it's quite interesting because there's a lot of like nation state actors as well. Like you've got like North Korea, for example, and they're doing a lot of hacking. We have like Russia and like all these different like. And the thing is that when it's a country, for like political reasons and stuff, and like when it's a country behind it, you have so many resources, right? So that's the thing. So that's like another interesting point. And it's sort of this idea of like warfare sort of in the past was like, okay, just like guns and like you're going to shoot people and whatever. Now we've got like, you know, missiles and all this kind of stuff. And sort of the next age of it is like this information warfare. It's like countries going against each other, and like, you know, if you hack into like a water plant or something and shut down the water plant for a city, that's going to cause a lot of problems, right? Or like the power station, right? And like this is the stuff that they're going after, like industrial control systems and that kind of thing, right?
Which is all like online now.
Which is all online. Like they, you know, I mean, it's not even necessarily online. Just if it's like digital and like someone makes a mistake, someone plugs in a USB or something, right? Like it can just mess up so much stuff, right? So this is like,
it's like that thing. Was it the rubber ducky?
The rubber ducky,
USB,
like I mean, exactly, like rubber duckies, or even just like, you know. Like there's people who've like tried just like leaving a bunch of USBs just like in a parking lot. And eventually someone's gonna pick it up, and their curiosity will, like, you know, curiosity kill cat. They're gonna pick it up and they're like, wonder what would happen if I plugged into my computer, and then everything's just destroyed at that point. You know, and that's it. Like, so it's like it can cause like a lot of issues. I mean, there was like the ransomware with the NHS. Like a lot of the NHS went down, and like you can sort of see, like, you know, if someone wanted to take a country down, there's like a lot of things they could do, right? So it's quite an interesting thing to be.
It's kind of scary as well. Like,
it is quite scary.
Remotely, without even, you know, being in the country, press a few clicks, do a few things, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah, I mean that's the power of computers, man. That's computer science. Like, you don't even need to, like, you know, before you had like spies, you're sending them to another country. And, like, you know, they're breaking in, you know, like, you know, long trench coat, all that kind of thing. Now you're
emails
just, like,
and USBs.
Yeah, now you're just like typing some stuff and you're like into the system. It's crazy, man. Yeah,
it is kind of scary in a way. I think another thing as well is the further you get into, from my experience at least, into computer science and understanding about online and security and that kind of stuff, you start to get a bit more concerned about your own data and your own privacy. So in your position as well, what's your kind of thoughts on your own data and privacy?
I would say that I think there's a lot more people who are like more private than me, I think, right? Like they don't post pictures online and that kind of thing. I'm kind of like, well, every company probably has my data anyway, which is not a good way to be thinking about it, right? And, you know, it's not ideal, but like I will, for example, like passwords, like, you know, use a password manager. Don't use the same password for everything. Use 2FA. And even for like two-factor authentication, like even using just your phone number and like getting SMSs is not really secure. Because there have been cases where, like, you know, you can talk to the phone company and like get the SIM switched out and like get the number, right? So you want to have like a separate 2FA thing, right? If you want to be really secure, you can get like a physical, like there's these YubiKeys, for example. So like to log in, you literally need to plug something into your computer or your laptop, right? Like you might even have like a fingerprint scanner on it if you want to be really secure. I'm not quite at that level, right? But it's sort of like this trade-off of convenience and security, I think, some of it. And, you know, there's stuff out there that's like hoping to make it more secure while making it more convenient. So like passkeys, what I was talking
I know
about
you mentioned
earlier.
the passkeys.
Yeah.
But what is it that makes it so much more secure?
So basically, I mean, the main thing is
if
that
someone just stole your phone, for example, wouldn't they just have access to all your passkeys? How does it
yeah,
work?
so the thing is that it would be, first of all, it would be locked behind usually like a PIN code or like Touch ID, Face ID, you know, that kind of thing, right? And the other thing, the main thing is that it, like, one of the big things it prevents is phishing, right? With, you know, phishing, like if someone sends you a link and you just enter your password's gone now, right?
It's finished.
The thing is with passkeys is that they only work for the website they were created for. So if
there's no way around
there's
that.
no way around that. There's no way around that. And there's no physical password either. It's just all through like public and private keys, right? So like asymmetric encryption, it's like the whole thing, right? But there's no password to remember, right? So it prevents phishing, and it's like much more secure because you're not giving away a password. It only works on the specific website that it was made for. So it's got a lot of benefits going for it, but it's going to take some time for it to be like fully integrated.
And become like more commonplace.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, okay, I see. I guess the only downside I see from that is if you switch from like your phone to like a Windows laptop, and then you have to.
Yeah, that's one of the things. So usually it's just like on the system, right? So if you have like all Apple devices, for example, it'll sync through iCloud and stuff. But if you're using different ones, it does get a bit tricky.
Yeah, even though it is more secure.
It is more secure, but then there's like password managers that you can have your passkeys in, right? And those can work across different computers and stuff. So there's like options there, but again, it's not the most convenient, right? And like, you know, I tried getting my parents into password managers, and they were kind of like, I'm just gonna stick to the Notes app. And I'm like, okay, I tried, man. I tried.
You do
exactly.
good,
Yeah. I was like,
it's a trade off from convenience to security.
exactly. Yeah. So like the easiest thing is having the same password everywhere that you have saved in a note, right?
But it's not very safe.
But it's the least secure thing you could do, right?
Exactly,
Versus on the other hand is like, you know, you have like your two. The other thing is like you have like your two-factor authentication. You plug in and you do like, you know, your fingerprint. And like obviously that's just like a pain. Like I just need to log into my Instagram, man.
I don't need to
do
go through all this every time.
Exactly. It's just a trade-off between convenience and security. And you sort of have to look at like, you know, I think it also matters to some extent. Like, if you're like a journalist, for example, you need to be much more careful, right?
Exactly.
If you're just like, you know, someone who's not doing too much, like you're like, my parents are probably fine, right? Like I don't think people are really attacking them. But if you're someone, you know, like a whistleblower or a journalist,
or you're working for the government,
or you're working for the government, or you're like some kind of defense company, or like, you know, something like that. Like if you're in a position where you should take it seriously, you really should take it seriously, right? And like at that point, like, you know, you don't get the convenience, but that's just part of like that's just, you have to deal with it, right? So I think it's really like this trade-off, and you just need to figure out like where you lie on that. But I would say for most people, I think getting a password manager is worth it. I know on the newest like iOS and macOS and all that, Apple introduced their own passwords app. And that's a good starting point, right? Because it's built in. You can just kind of use that. I think, you know, Google saves passwords in your Google account as well, so you can look at that if you're on Android and stuff. I'm not sure entirely what Windows does. I don't know if they do anything.
Probably nothing.
Probably nothing. I mean, yeah.
So, like I mentioned a few days ago, we were at the Bet Fair, right?
Yeah.
And I saw so many of these little cool projects that you could do. And a lot of these companies, they presented it in a way that was very accessible to younger people.
Yeah.
So one of them, for example, I saw was a Lego set. It was kind of like a Lego set.
Right, yeah.
But you could program it.
Okay.
To do different things, and it had voice detection and that kind of stuff. So you say start, and it would start moving. You say stop, it would stop moving. And you know, the reason I bring this up is because there's so much ideas a lot of kids have, and a lot of people have in general. So many ideas for projects, so many ideas for apps. If me, for example, or any of the viewers, let's say I want to start getting into app development, and I'm from a completely fresh, clean slate, no experience to programming. What does that journey look like? Like where would I go? Because to say a lot of people would say I want to get into programming. That's so broad.
It's very broad. Yeah.
So I say I want to develop an app. Again, very broad.
Very broad.
What are the different routes I could take, and what does the journey look like?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that like you've got a lot of options actually, right? So one option, right, is that you could learn programming and like learn all the different languages that you need for an app and like develop an app and like do all this, right? And that's quite technical, right?
Yeah.
You can do that, but it would take a lot of time if you're coming from a completely like not programming background, right? You have, for example, if you want to develop an iOS app, you're going to learn like Swift UI, all these different languages, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a bit long, right? But there's a lot of apps out there. The one that comes to mind, for example, is so when we were at the school teaching, when I was doing my placement, the year 13s actually had to come up with an app, right? And again, they had some programming experience, but it wasn't something too technical. And they were using this thing called Thunkable, right? So what Thunkable what you could do basically in it was you could make different screens, you could add buttons, but it's all like kind of drag and drop, right? So you're like making all the different screens, you're saying, okay, this button leads to here. You could have like a really simple database there, and you could pull from that database, you could add stuff to it. So it wasn't technical at all, where you weren't actually going in and writing code, but you're able to build an app using all these blocks that they had given you. And there's a lot of different platforms like that. The only one that comes to mind is that at the moment. But if you look into it, there's quite a lot out there where you don't actually need to be super technical or have like a lot of programming experience or that kind of thing. You can just sort of build an app by just dragging stuff and like, what looks good. You can sort of use the ideas of the apps that you've used before, right? Like you sort of have an idea. I think most people nowadays have an idea of like what a good app looks like, or not even a good app, like what you need to have in an app. Like
they're familiar with it because
they're familiar with the amount of apps, like that's all we do, right? So there's a lot of stuff there, and you can sort of just drag and drop, connect stuff, and like they have a lot of tutorials built into it as well, which is really good. So you can like, you're like, oh, like how do I do this thing? And they'll probably have some kind of tutorial. Often they have like videos and stuff as well. And it's really cool because some of them even let you actually install it to your phone. So you can connect your phone there and you can just see like you've not programmed anything, but you have this little thing on your phone now. You click on it and like it's the app that you made, right?
Basically created.
Exactly. So it's like, it's quite cool. And that's quite an approachable way to get into it, right? I mean, that's like one of the routes. The other option, like I was saying, is that you could learn programming and like learn all the stuff that you need to do to build an app and everything, right? Different languages, all that kind of thing. There's so many different frameworks out there and whatnot. Some are easier to get into than others, right? So it really is a mix. But if you're someone who's coming from like a not very technical background, you're like, I don't really want to learn like all this programming, but I have this idea for an app. There's platforms out there like Thunkable
that make it more accessible.
That make it much, much more accessible.
Kind of reminds me of like very basic, like Scriblio.
Yeah. Or like Scratch, maybe?
Scratch, that's something.
Scratch, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Scratch is a classic. Yeah.
Everyone loves
Scratch.
It's like a classic, it's like a very simplified programming tool.
Exactly, because it's teaching you, because I mean, the thing about programming is that like the basic concepts of it, like you've got variables, you've got if conditions, loops, this kind of thing. Anytime you start programming, like that's the first thing they teach you, right?
It's like, and if
this happens, then that happens. And I feel like those are quite easy concepts to get your head around. It's just when you start getting more and more technical, that's when you kind of like lose in. You're like, what's going on, right? Like functions and pointers and this kind of thing, right? I think that's where it gets confusing. But stuff like Scratch and whatever, it introduces you to those ideas of like if conditions and for loops and stuff pretty simply. And yeah, like even apps like Thunkable, like the platform, because that's the one I have experience with. That also like it lets you do like a bit of that, right? But it's really not technical in the sense that like you're not going to be super overwhelmed.
It's not, you're not like building it from scratch.
You're not building it from scratch. Yeah, exactly.
It gives that basis, and it reminds me because I remember at that time when I was in school.
Yeah.
And we used to learn about computer science. There was an app, I think it was called Kudo.
Right. Okay.
Where you basically can develop your own game.
Yeah.
And it relied is basically the same kind of idea where it simplified it down, so you could say that if character A is here, then do this.
Right.
If you enter this area, then do this. That kind of thing.
Exactly.
So, you could program it in that way. And for me, it was like a really like it made it seem so much more accessible.
Yeah.
It made me think that okay, now I got the idea. What's next?
Exactly.
And at that time, I really wanted to get into like video game programming. Is that not something you've thought about? Or
I just enjoyed playing games. I never really thought about video game development.
Actually, making it.
I've also like listened to a lot of podcasts and like stuff from the video game industry, and it can be quite like a difficult job to do. Like the hours are super tough, and it's quite intense. Yeah, exactly. So that also was like I don't know, but I know a lot of people who like want to go into video. I think it's really cool. I think it's really cool because like you're at the end you're making this thing that like people are going to enjoy and have fun with, right? Actually, talking about that, even like if you want to develop a game, I was actually quite surprised. There's Roblox Game Studio, right? Because there's Roblox, right? And like everyone's heard about it. I've never really played it personally, but it's very big among the kids. The kids these days.
It's like a fashion game, and there's like the games.
There's like all these different things you can do, but they have like this Roblox Game Studio that allows you to basically sort of like make your own game. Like yes, it's like still Roblox characters, but you've got a lot of that game dev idea behind it. And I was surprised at how full featured it was, and like it was really interesting because I had not come across it before as well. So this was the year 13s were building an app, the year 12s were building a game, and they were all doing it in Roblox Game Studio, and I was really surprised at like how much they could do in that, right?
How in depth it was and stuff.
How in depth it was and everything, right? And again, like you needed some technical like expertise there with like a bit of programming and stuff, but it really wasn't much. It really wasn't much. Yeah, very accessible.
And what's so cool about it is in my instance as well, it made me realize this is really something I want to get into.
Yeah, exactly.
And for me, the big part, like the part I enjoyed the most was the problem solving part.
Yes.
Like you do this, set things up, and then you realize, wait, something's not working. And then this, because you have to consider everything.
Exactly.
Right. And that's like a part I really find interesting.
Yeah.
Having to consider every possibility and like find a solution and work around all of that.
Yeah.
Which again is another big part of computer science that drew me in. And I think
exactly. I've always been like, I love like solving problems and stuff. And that's like one of the things that like a lot of the degree in computer science is just like, it's not even about the content because a lot of that you can learn on your own. It's more about like how to think about the problems and like problem solving and like breaking it down into smaller problems and like how to approach stuff and stuff like that. So it's like those things that you learn that aren't necessarily the content, right? Because a lot of content, you you can learn that on your own. You can read a book about it, whatever, right? Obviously, it helps to have a lecturer who can guide you through it if it's really complex and stuff. But a lot of it is the problem solving, right?
It's a practical element.
It's a practical element. Yeah, exactly. Like that's the fun bit of writing code, right? Like when you're writing like a program or you're like programming some assignment, like, you know, there's parts of it where you're like, oh, I just want to get through it. But like the really fun part is like, okay, I've got this problem I need to solve. I need to write the code to figure it out. Like I need to break this problem down. How am I going to approach it, right? How am I going to think about all the edge cases? How am I going to think about all this stuff? How am I going to write my code to like fit around all that, right? And that's the really fun part. That's the part that I really enjoy. And it can be difficult sometimes when you're caught up in all these assignments to like lose track of that. But I try like to keep that in mind. Like this, the problem solving aspect is what's really fun. Right. Like that's the best part. To be honest with you.
And you can sink so many hours into it.
Exactly.
And ultimately, it's just fun.
It's just
fun.
fun.
To do something in your life, your career wise. That you enjoy.
Exactly. Yeah.
I definitely think it comes. It's part of that.
Exactly.
And I'm assuming there's quite a lot of like problem solving as well when it comes to cybersecurity as well.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think that's like the big.
That's
big
the thing,
part,
right? So it's like one of the things I enjoy is like looking at like protocols and stuff, right? So it's like, for example, I spent some time last year looking at like when I tap my card in a machine, what actually happens, what's going on between there, right? And it was really interesting because basically the cards that we use here, they have just like one payment network on them. So it's either Visa or MasterCard, or I guess like Amex as well, but like just looking at Visa and MasterCard, right? And so when you tap your card, it knows that it's going to be either Visa or MasterCard, right? Back home in Saudi Arabia, we have a local payment network called Mada. And basically your debit cards are all Mada cards, but also Visa or MasterCards. Right, so it's got both of them on there, right? So when I'm at home and I'm just using my debit card in Saudi, right? It's using the Mada payment network because that's the local one, right? But if I take my card and I bring it here to the UK and I go to the cafe and I pay for something, then it's going to use the Visa or the MasterCard thing, right? And it was really interesting because my professor was like, the professor I was working with, he was like sort of interested in seeing how it worked. So it was really fun because we were like trying to figure out like how does it actually do it, right? And like basically the card essentially has like it has like these identifiers. So it has like, okay, I'm a Visa card, but I'm also this other card. And then the card machine is like, cool, I'm going to select this one. And there's like this whole back and forth that happens when you just tap your card. And it's like you don't even know that's happening. It's like instantaneous, right? And like you can go into like all the specifications and like you know the thing that drew me to it because he had done a few attacks against these payment networks. And one of the really cool attacks that he did, well, there were two really cool ones. One was like this relay attack where he was in New York, the other person was in London, and he was able to tap his card in New York, and they were able to relay all that to the terminal in London. So he wasn't even there, and they were able to pay for it there, right? And it was just, and the reason that worked is because the whole protocol that Visa had come up with, they didn't take into account that like there shouldn't be that much of a gap, right? So instead of it being like, you know, it's like 4 seconds or 5 seconds, like they should have limited it to like, you know, like half a second or even less than that, right? So that's like this little vulnerability you can find and exploit. Right?
And you can use that time to just...
Exactly, And like one of the other more recent researches, I think it was on BBC and everything as well, that like I found really interesting was that if you've ever been on the London Underground, you can just tap your phone, right? Like you don't have to actually do Apple Pay and like scan your face and stuff. You can literally just tap your phone. There's this feature called Express Transit, right?
Yeah, I saw that come up on my phone. So I think even when your phone's out of battery.
Even when it's out of battery and stuff, like you can just tap it and just go through, right? And the way it's supposed to work is that there shouldn't be a way for me to charge any money when it does that because it's just like an authorization basically, right?
Just to say that.
And it should only work for those TFL like card readers or like other places like in New York or like, I don't know. There's other transit systems
designed
specifically for transit systems, right? And they were basically able to find a way to make it so that they could do any purchases, like even £1,000 using that same way without actually doing Face ID. And it was just like some problem with the protocol that Visa had. And basically, you know, it was interesting because they came up with this whole thing and they told Visa about it. And Visa was like, cool, we don't really care. Because what it comes down to with the payment companies, for example, is that like, sure, there is this vulnerability, right? And there might be some amount of fraud. But for them, they can just reimburse the fraud that happens. And it's cheaper for them to do that than to actually go and fix the problem.
Pay like all these programs.
Pay all the programs to like fix
change it in every single device.
Exactly. So like change the whole protocol on that thing. So they were kind of like, we don't really care.
Like,
cool, you found it, but
well done for finding it.
Yeah, well done. But it was also like, it is quite like a technical thing to be doing. And like you need all these devices and everything. So even when I was in Saudi, like, so when I went back to Saudi, I was like, let me try getting, because the best way to do it would be to actually capture the exchange happening between the card and the machine.
Yeah.
And there's this device called a Proxmark that you can get. And it's like this little like RFID thing. It's used for a lot of RFID, NFC kind of thing. Right? And basically the way I was doing it is that you put that card next to the machine and tap your card on it. But that's also connected to your computer. So you've got your computer there and then you've got like this thing hanging off of it and you're tapping your card on there. So I had to find a shop that was willing to let me do that because they were kind of like, what are you doing? Like this, are you going to steal all of it? I was like, listen, don't worry. Nothing's going to happen to you. Yeah. Or like one of the other ones.
It would be directly on top of the card.
It would be directly on top of the card. Or the other thing was that I have two phones. One of them I put the card on, and then the other phone I actually tap onto the machine. Right, and then it basically captures the traffic in the middle. But I also need my laptop on the side for that. So it was kind of difficult finding a shop where I could convince them to let me do that.
Go in and just do your thing.
Literally, I was like, guys, like I just need to make like
suspicious guy walks in with like bare laptops
like a laptop, two phones, it was the most suspicious thing I've ever done in my life. And the guy's like, "Are you sure? Like it's safe?" I was like, "Don't worry, man, it's all good." Like I was like, "Actually, you're taking money from me because I was like, I need you to charge me, right?" He's trying to give me the money afterwards. I'm like, "Listen, man, just keep it. Like I did all this for like it's fine, like for your trouble." But yeah, it was interesting trying to find a shop that could do it.
So funny to watch.
Just
like a cafe, sitting back and seeing this exchange.
Like, there's a laptop, there's like two phones, there's a card, and like I'm trying to do it. I was like, it's not working. And there's like just stuff going by on the laptop like crazy. And I was like, I wonder what people thought. They must have been like, what the hell is this guy doing?
This is hacking broad. Exactly. Walking inside, I was like, just gonna hack you guys.
What's going on here? But that was really interesting, and it kind of like teaches you a lot because it's like when you tap your card, you don't really think about it at all, right?
So what did it do? So you basically saw the exchange take place on your laptop?
Saw the exchange happen, and then essentially we're trying to figure out like what actually happens when it selects the mother payment network.
Is that not like public
what
information?
There are specifications and stuff out there, but they're not always like the most clear thing, right? And the best way is to like get like hands-on data and like actually be able to figure it out, right? But that was like really interesting. That was something that we like looked into for a bit. Unfortunately, I got really busy with my dissertation and everything, and like I wasn't able to continue. That's how it goes. But for that bit, like it was super interesting because it's like, again, it was not something I really thought about. Like you see like the logos on your cards and you're like, yeah, whatever, man, I'm just gonna pay for it, right? Like just tap it and move on, right?
Because it reminds me of that thing they did. It's like a popular scam.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot in America where they get a card machine and they put another thing on top. And as you put your card in, it scans the other device scans it. And this is kind of if someone they could possibly find a way to do the same thing with this, right?
I mean, the thing is that like
put on top.
A lot of the cards now are just NFC, right? So you just literally like NFC reader, you can just get all the details, right? That's why like even your wallet, you probably want to keep it in like one of those NFC wallets where it doesn't keep the thing. I don't do that myself, but I probably should. You probably should, right? But then you can use stuff like the thing is that like some people are like, oh, like I don't want to use Apple Pay or like you know Google Pay or all this kind of stuff because like I don't want them to like have my card, but like it's actually more secure, right?
Really? Then
so because it like tokenizes it basically, it turns into a token, so like they actually can't get more money from you, and like it also uses like your phone lock to do it, so it's like more secure.
The card is just a card.
Exactly, your card is just a card. So I like it's actually worth using. It's generally more secure. Like people are a bit like I don't want to put my phone like my card into my phone. Like what if my phone gets stolen? I'm like actually if your phone gets stolen you'll be fine. If your card gets stolen they can just tap it around and they're fine. So it's.
But I don't know if you know this, but how does it actually work with the what's it called when it's when the express not the express one for the transit systems where they put it into your phone even when it's out of battery. How does that kind of work? Is it like the way I don't understand how it works even if your phone is dead.
So the way it works basically is that like the thing that it uses is the thing called NFC, near field communication. And NFC antennas are usually like, so the ones in the card are passive, right? So the ones in your card don't actually need like power for them. And the way that, they just work.
It's like an ID badges as well.
Exactly, So like what it does is that the machine itself, when it comes near it, it gives it the power to the card, right? So the card is just passive. It doesn't need to be like charged or anything like that. It's just the machine that does the work basically. Right? So it's a similar thing with the phone where it can have like that data stored there and it can just give it to the...
So it just writes the data onto it and then...
It's sort of like it does that exchange based off when it comes close to that actual thing. Specifically for express, like for transit systems and that. But so the way it knows that it's a transit system is that there's like this like magic byte thing, right? In like the exchange. And like if it sees that, it's like, oh, okay, it's a transit system. I'm going to go into this like mode where it's a £0 like or like $0 whatever exchange where it doesn't actually use that, like it doesn't charge you. It just does like an authorization basically. And then that can also be done when the phone is off. So it's like quite cool stuff basically.
Yeah, that's really cool. And like whenever, even like 10, 5 years, even if the phone's still dead, it just works. It essentially works
actually,
as a...
not quite. Because the thing is,
okay.
So I think with the phones, the way it works is that when your battery is like dead, it's like not like completely 100%
There's still
dead.
a little bit
There's like a tiny, because like, you know, even if your phone's completely dead, you can press it and it gives you like the little red sign on your phone if you've ever had that, right? I try not to get that point personally, but you know, sometimes, right? So it uses, I think it also uses that tiny amount of battery to also be able to power the thing, the express transit, so you can at least get home or whatever.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah. No, that's really cool. And I remember like this, you know, this stuff kind of sticks out to me because on my old phone, an NFC chip, I got like water damage.
Okay, right. Yeah.
I just carry physical cards everywhere.
Cards,
But no, that's really interesting. And I don't know, there's so much we could get into in terms of like the different sides of computer science. The different, even from this. It takes hours and hours and hours. And maybe there'll be a part 2.
Maybe there will be. Maybe there will be. Yeah.
Maybe because again, there's still a lot we haven't touched.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And yeah, thank you so much. And thanks you guys as well for joining in. And yeah, see you guys next time.
Cool.
Perfect.